Hello everyone, and thanks again for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Our first graphic shows the hazardous weather. Hazardous weather graphic is the first one today, and yellow here along the Alaska Range, that's for wind advisories there, especially through the passes. That kicks into effect at 10 p.m. this evening. And those winds gusting will begin to gust as high as 55 miles an hour later tonight and extend through Sunday. And actually Sunday night, the advisory out for. And back here to the west, St. Lawrence Island, western Seward Peninsula, Bering Sea coastline there in the north side, and also here along the northwest coast. That's high surf advisory, which is again comes into effect later tonight and continues through tomorrow and possibly even tomorrow night there for those areas. Look for tides, heavy surf and tides possibly 4 to 5 feet higher than they otherwise would be if the winds didn't pick up as strong as they're expected to. So moving on to the fire danger chart here, and definitely that area of extreme fire danger has grown up here over the northeast. From the Yukon Flats, Yukon River area, Porcupine River Valley on up to the Brooks Range, and even high fire danger showing up in the Brooks Range itself, possibly even the spilling into the North Slope area there, and of course across Koyukuk, Kobuk, on out to the Selawik Valleys. High fire danger also for the Susitna Valley, areas of the Kenai Peninsula, Copper River Basin, actually some extremes starting to show up there in the Copper River Basin, and actually as well as the Susitna Valley, kind of very small areas not showing up on the chart here, and then increasing fire danger also occurring out over the lower or the mid and lower Yukon River Valley area, even possibly out to the delta of the Kuskokwim Delta. And satellite imagery today showing some clouds finally shifting off to the east here into Canada, so mostly clear through here, maybe a few showers developing along this area of cloudiness along the Alaska Range. Nothing too serious, definitely no lightning strikes detected, but fair weather here over just about all the interior. Actually some good VFR on the eastern Arctic coast there with temperatures rising in the mid-60s around Deadhorse this afternoon, 7 degrees with due to offshore flow there ahead of this band of moisture, which is signifies a frontal boundary there that just brought some light rain to the central Arctic coast there. Barrow picking up about, let's see, 0.06 of an inch during the day today, and winds kicking up as high as 50 miles an hour in gusts, 45 to 50 there at Cape Lisburne. Not nearly that strong on the remainder of the Arctic coast. This is a perfect wind setup for Cape Lisburne. And down farther to the south over the Bering Sea, you can see kind of a washing out frontal boundary right through here with the main low center back to the west there. And just clouds and gusty winds here across the Bering Sea with widely isolated showers along the Aleutians, but west winds gusting 40 to 50 miles an hour, Adak and Atka, and light rain. Again, really this not much of a rain producer at all. Just Cape Newnham at 0.16 of an inch today. Otherwise, Chignik picking up about 4-5 hundredths, just a few hundredths over the Pribilof Islands. So a little bit more of a wind than rain producer this system is here. And again, the low center hanging back to the west a little bit, that causing the front to weaken. But that'll change and kind of re-energize over the next 12 to 24 hours. And rolling this through again, I can see some more moisture down here well to the south of the Aleutians though. But again today, most of the, well actually the heaviest winds and the precipitation actually north of the chain. So could be possibly some minimum storm force winds around that low center farther to the north in the western Bering. Otherwise the southeast coast here, pretty dry day, some sunshine. Any showers are quite isolated and very widely scattered, but there is an extensive area of low clouds here, possible fog here along and off the coast there up to the North Gulf Coast. Otherwise sunshine, temperatures 70s, lower 80s in the interior, and a little bit of rain there in the Arctic coast of that weakening front, high pressure over the Seward Peninsula, keeping it fair there. And this front right along the southwest coast, and again, areas of very light rain along the southwest coast here, mostly out toward the coastline. Alaska Peninsula, isolated showers here, and probably I'm signifying too many of those showers, even on this chart here. Really the wind more of a factor there. Again, 40, 50 miles an hour, Adak and Atka, 30 to 40 Pribilofs, and even windier right through this area of that 990 millibar low. And for tonight, that front will shift inland here and bring a chance of rain or increasing chances of rain. Kodiak Island, across Bristol Bay, mainly the upslope areas of the western Alaska Range, Kuskokwim Mountains, back to the northwest. But moisture will increase as the flow becomes more southerly, so rain, light rain will spread and increase along the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula this evening. Then that'll expand eastward there to Cordova and definitely up into the Passage Canal area after midnight and toward morning, with even some moisture possibly streaming into the northern part of the Panhandle. Definitely Elfin Cove could be in the form of just light rain, drizzle, nothing heavy at all. And high pressure slipping on down right over the southern southeast coast. That'll keep an extensive area of the low clouds and fog and light winds in place there. Just isolated showers possible over towards Stewart and Hyder. Outlook for tomorrow, that ridge axis sets up a little bit off the coast or right along the coast there. So mostly cloudy, maybe partly sunny in the south. A little bit of moisture up to the north, very light, but definitely more clouds over the northern Panhandle than would be in the south. And the chance of rain holds here over the North Gulf Coast. That front slowly edging its way eastward with a narrow band of light rain along that, all the way up toward the Northwest Brooks Range. Gradient tightening up here along the Alaska Range for those 55-mile-an-hour wind gusts. And high surf advisories continue St. Lawrence Island to the northwest coast through tomorrow. And tides could even be a couple of feet higher here along the southwest coast with this west to southwest wind rolling right in toward Kuskokwim Bay. Scattered showers, isolated maybe here, nothing widespread, but pretty windy conditions continue across the entire Aleutian chain, possibly the Pribilofs as well. And then the outlook for Monday, that front pushes eastward and really washes out here. So just increasing sunshine from the central interior as you head over toward Canada, dry in the Tanana Valley, dry in the Yukon Flats where the high fire danger is. Some moisture may kick off in the southern slopes of the Brooks Range in the form of light rain or scattered showers. Picking up, though, becoming a little more numerous back to the west and southwest in toward the Noatak Valley, Kotzebue Sound area, the Seward Peninsula, and generally wet conditions in store for the southwest interior and along this trough as it swings in toward western Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, just clipping the Fox Islands. Very weak system out to the west, light rain, drizzle, fog, IFR type conditions with light winds out there where there seems to usually be during this time of the year. And mostly cloudy, isolated showers for the Panhandle, but the rainfall or moisture is starting to increase up to the north. Low temperatures tonight down that way, lower to mid 50s. 55 to 60 up over the northeast and down to 30 to, well, about 30 degrees there in the central Arctic coast. Otherwise, 40s to 50s out to the southwest interior, upper 40s Alaska Peninsula. Highs for tomorrow, lower 70s in the upper Yukon Valley, and then lows followed by highs, lower to mid 70s there in the upper Yukon Valley, cooling back to the mid 50s along the southwest coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
A lot of moisture streaming in across southern Alaska tomorrow. The IFR tomorrow morning here up inland here to the at least the coast range here, and then VFR north side of the mountains, Copper River Basin. IFR developing possibly on the southern slopes of the central Alaska Range, more likely though on the eastern slopes of the western range. And then up here, Brooks Range, western areas, Arctic Coast IFR, IFR central western Bering Sea. For the afternoon tomorrow, I've got an area IFR up here around the Brooks Range over the west-northwest part of the state, and then right along the central and western Arctic coast, module VFR through the strait, IFR, southwest Nunivak Island, in and around the Pribilofs, southward to the central and western Aleutians, IFR right up along the southern and eastern side of Kodiak Island and the southern eastern side of the Kenai Peninsula, into mostly western Prince William Sound, hanging in along the North Gulf Coast, and also over the northern Panhandle with marginal VFR all the way down to Dixon Entrance. And Monday morning, even more IFR here in the forecast for the areas from the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast, but south of the mountains, VFR, Canada, right into the central interior, and then along and on the southern slopes of the central western Alaska Range, that's where you'll see the lowest flying conditions once again, and also up along the North Gulf Coast and along the Kenai Peninsula, IFR. Looks like VFR, downslope areas of Cook Inlet, and then Kodiak Island, areas of IFR. IFR hangs in the northern panhandle, but improving down to the south, looks like becoming VFR. And then IFR, much of the Aleutians for the afternoon, that retreats back to just west of Adak, with Marsville VFR remaining behind, covering the Pribilofs, Fox Islands, right into the, well into the southwest interior here. And then same pattern, really not much change here for the areas along and south of the Alaska Range. And the panhandle staying IFR in the north once again, and VFR down to the south. And for the passes, tomorrow, Anaktuvuk becoming IFR. Same trend for Adigan, becoming IFR as well. Lake Clark and Merrill, both IFR. Rainy, Marsville VFR, IFR on the eastern entrance. And for Windy, VFR, but developing Marsville VFR south side throughout the day. And for Isabel, lowest conditions to be on the southern approach here. VFR trending toward marginal throughout the entire day here through the pass itself. And Mentasta, a little bit slower to see the conditions deteriorate there, holding pretty much VFR, but the southern entrance trending toward marginal VFR later in the afternoon. And for Tanita, VFR trending toward marginal VFR as well. But Portage socked in with IFR, especially on the eastern entrance. And Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR to start with, and that'll be gradually become IFR into the afternoon and toward evening. And for the freezing levels, 12,000 feet here, upper level ridge collapsing, slipping off to the southeast. So warmest air aloft now will be over the panhandle, 12,000 feet, 10,000 feet over the southeast interior, down to the Alaska Peninsula, and some chillier air showing up here now along the western Arctic coast. We've got 2,000 feet there across the Chukchi Sea. To about Barrow, back to Cape Lisburne. Otherwise, out to the west, 6,000 to 8,000 feet. And for icing, a lot of moisture coming in, especially to the southern, western interior, and then sliding off to the northeast here, Brooks Range, North Slope areas, with occasional moderate, above about 6,000 feet in the orange shaded areas here. Be widespread moderate rime icing there. And also here over southern Alaska, mostly above about 9,000 feet with a warmer air aloft. And then icing threats diminish, become a little less severe. Well, there won't be any severe icing, but be a little less out there to the west, above about 6,000 feet. Jet stream, upper level low tomorrow, right about in this position. Jet stream splitting, but the entire pattern now shifting off to the east. The main high center now retreating back and weakening down just east of the southern panhandle. Still some weak ridging left behind, but so much southwest flow really won't make much of a difference. And looking at 9,000 feet, pretty strong winds. Southerlies 30 to 40 knots, south central Alaska, 45 to 50 through the interior. South turning southwest, but much lighter back to the northwest. And northerlies 25 to 50 knots coming around that low center. Same thing at 3,000 feet. Much the same pattern, south to north flow here, as high as 45 knots over the northeast interior. 50 knots, eastern Aleutians. Turbulence, widespread moderate chop from the Brooks Range through much of the interior and all of the Aleutians.
Floating hundreds of miles from Earth, astronauts get a unique perspective of our planet. While they might recognize landmarks, space is the only place they can see the very edge of our planet's atmosphere.
From orbit, particularly looking at the horizon, did bring to mind how thin the atmosphere is. It's like an onion skin around this great big ball of the Earth.
This uppermost layer of Earth's atmosphere, the ionosphere, also overlaps with the very beginning of space. It's the job of NASA's new mission GOLD, the Global Scale Observations of the Limmendisk Instrument, to study this region, a region that isn't just for astronauts to explore, but that affects humans every day down on the ground. For one thing, this layer of the upper atmosphere helps protect us from harmful radiation and energy emanating from the sun. But in our modern society, it does so much more. It affects the smartphone that sits in your pocket and the radio waves that guide our airplanes. The ionosphere is a crucial layer of the atmosphere through which our communications and GPS signals travel. And when this region changes, it impacts those communication signals. Changes can occur above this region from the sun's activity, also known as space weather. Changes can also occur below from Earth's weather, such as hurricanes and wind patterns. GOLD connects the dots between how space weather and Earth's weather shape the upper reaches of the atmosphere. But this region isn't easy to study. The ionosphere spans roughly 60 to 400 miles from Earth's surface, which is too high for aircraft and scientific balloons, and the lower regions are too low to easily study with satellites. What are attainable, however, are the swaths of red and green light shining out from the upper atmosphere. Formed when the sun's rays hit atmospheric molecules, this light, named airglow, comes from green and red bands of glowing gas. Some of the airglow is invisible to our eyes, shining in infrared and ultraviolet light, which can only be seen with scientific instrumentation. Taking advantage of our planet's natural glow is gold. The gold instrument, which is about the size of a mini-fridge, is hitching a ride on a commercial communication satellite, SES-14. The satellite's orbit lies 22,000 miles above Earth, where it can record images in ultraviolet light to monitor changes in airglow across the globe. These images give information on the temperature, density, and composition of particles in the upper atmosphere. Gold collects these observations faster than any mission has ever done before. It captures an image of Earth's entire disk every 30 minutes, allowing scientists to see how the upper atmosphere evolves throughout the day. Gold joins a host of missions studying the very nature of space, around Earth, the Sun, and planets. As NASA ventures farther and farther from home, knowing the nature of space itself is crucial for our journey to understand our solar system and beyond.
There's a new class of chemical compounds impacting the Earth's ozone layer and raising concerns among some scientists. But a new NASA analysis indicates stratospheric ozone could actually be impacted more by climate change and the continued release of already banned chemicals. The Earth's ozone hole is showing signs of recovery, decades after the landmark agreement called the Montreal Protocol that banned many chemical compounds harmful to the ozone layer.
So we know the Montreal Protocol was a huge success. This was signed in the late 1980s when scientists and policymakers from around the world gathered together to try to save the ozone layer.
The chemicals they regulated persist in the atmosphere for many decades. They thin the ozone layer and they create a seasonal hole over Antarctica. They basically take away part of our planet's natural sunscreen, and that increases the risk of skin cancer and damage to plants.
Scientists have projected the ozone hole could disappear almost completely by about 2075, but several factors could delay that recovery.
There are some industrial compounds that are not banned by the Montreal Protocol, but as they enter the atmosphere, they will also hurt the ozone layer.
But the unregulated compounds have a short lifespan in the atmosphere, unlike the chlorofluorocarbons that were originally regulated. So they have a short-lived impact on ozone, and we don't think they'll delay recovery by more than a few years.
We projected by 2050, more than half of the ozone-depleting compounds in the atmosphere will come from long-lived substances banned by the protocol.
Because these compounds stay in the air for such a long time, compared to the unregulated, short-lived compounds, they will have a disproportionate and lingering impact on ozone. So any non-compliance with the protocol can have significant consequences.
And the really big uncertainty in ozone layer recovery is climate change. There are many naturally produced ozone-depleting substances that are emitted by the oceans. And as the oceans continue to warm due to climate change, those emissions will increase, and that will further delay ozone recovery.
Scientists want to better understand how climate change will affect ozone recovery.
This is a hard problem. As a scientific community, we need to work on this major issue. We now have a powerful new tool to simulate atmosphere and its interaction with land and ocean to study this issue. And that's what we're going to do.
How can you see the atmosphere? The answer is blowing in the wind. Tiny particles known as aerosols are carried by the air around the globe. This visualization uses data from NASA satellites combined with our knowledge of physics and meteorology to track 3 aerosols: dust, smoke, and sea salt. Sea salt, shown here in blue, is picked up by winds passing over the ocean. As tropical storms and hurricanes form, the salt particles are concentrated into the spiraling shape we all recognize. With their movements, we can follow the formation of Hurricane Irma and see the dust from the Sahara, shown in tan, get washed out of the storm center by the rain. Advances in computing speed allow scientists to include more details of these physical processes in their simulations of how the aerosols interact with the storm systems. The increased resolution of the computer simulation is apparent in fine details like the hurricane bands spiraling counterclockwise. Computer simulations let us see how different processes fit together and evolve as a system. By using mathematical models to represent nature, we can separate the system into component parts and better understand the underlying physics of each. Today's research improves next year's weather forecasting ability. Hurricane Ophelia was very unusual. It headed northeast, pulling in Saharan dust and smoke from wildfires in Portugal, carrying both to Ireland and the UK. This aerosol interaction was very different from other storms of the season. As computing speed continues to increase, scientists will be able to bring more scientific details into the simulations, giving us a deeper understanding of our home planet.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis. Starting to, actually this area closing off from what it was, but this zone on the western coast here over the next week, 5 to 7 days, expected to start breaking up and opening up there due to, it's already beginning to crumble and thaw. And so it ought to start opening up pretty good here over the next week, and really not much significant change anywhere else expected. Look for east to southeast winds, only at 10 knots for the southern coast of the Panhandle there, and 5-foot seas. South to southeast, 10 knots on the north coast with 5-foot seas. Light southeast winds for Clarence Strait, South 15 Stevens Passage. Small craft advisories up to 25 knots for northern Lynn Canal. And that holds through Monday as well there, and also brings some small craft advisories with 25-knot winds into the north coast. And as you go down the coastline, winds diminish and you're back down to 10 knots here with 5-foot seas. Prince William Sound, small craft advisories tomorrow, southeast 25, seas 4 feet. And southeast winds here for the North Gulf Coast as well, seas 5 to 7 feet. A little stronger there for the Barren Islands, southeast 30, 8-foot seas, and gales still in the forecast for Kamishak Bay. Looks like a good bet there. It seas up to 10 feet, 30-knot winds south of the Forelands and northern Cook Inlet, variable to northwest at about 15. And for Monday, variable to east at 10. Pretty light winds northern Cook Inlet, small craft advisories south of the Forelands, Kamishak Bay, southeast 25, south 25 for the Barren Islands, and southerlies 20 to 25 knots here for the North Gulf Coast. Seas running around 9 feet. And small craft advisories again there for Prince William Sound on Monday with seas running a little higher at 6 feet. And Kodiak Islands, south winds 25 knots, seas 5 to 9 feet. Even stronger winds from Sitkinak all the way to Cape Sarachev. Pretty uniform though, southwest at 30 with 10 to 15-foot seas. Gales here on the north side of the peninsula with seas there up to 16 feet, and small craft advisories in effect for Bristol Bay for Sunday with seas at 8 feet. And then on Monday, those seas actually bump up to 9 feet, but the winds come down to 20 knots. West-southwest 25 to 30 for the Alaska Peninsula, 30-knot winds right up to Sitkinak with 13-foot seas. Small crafts hold on the east side of Kodiak Island, 25 knots. Chillicothe Strait drops down to 20. And for the western Aleutians, stiff 30-knot breeze out there with 9 to 12-foot seas, which turns into gale force winds here, Adak and Atkin, and that kicks up in some cases as high as 40 knots there across eastern Aleutians, with seas running 14 to 19 feet. And for Monday, west winds 30 knots for the Fox Islands, seas 13 to 14 feet. Winds coming down here for the central Aleutians, a little bit there, northwest, west-northwest 20 to 30. Small craft advisories out west, with seas running 8 to 10 feet. And for the southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, that's where you'll see the strongest winds, south at 30 knots, west 25 tomorrow, 16-foot seas for the Pribilofs, north 30 St. Matthew Island, northerly gales for St. Lawrence Island at 35 knots, south 25 for Norton Sound. Those turn east to 15 there for the Sound on Monday, north 30 knots, St. Lawrence Island, right on down to the north shore of Nunivak Island, as well as the northern Bering Sea, turns northwest 30 knots across the Pribilofs, 13-foot seas there. And up along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, pretty light winds out of the west-northwest tomorrow, 10 knots, and that's about it. 15 for the central coast, picking up to 20 knots out of the north here on the west side. And 30-knot winds there from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson down through the Bering Strait, north at 35 knots with 11-foot seas. And for Monday, those fall back a little bit to 30 knots, seas stay the same, 30-knot winds up to Cape Beaufort, and then they drop down to 20, light winds again on the north and east side there. Northerlies at about 10 knots, a little more northeast there toward Demarcation Point. And for tonight, again, this weak front pushes inland, bringing a band of clouds in, light rain with it, Kodiak Island, all the way up into the northwest interior. Moisture will be increasing here with this southerly flow as the whole system slowly advances eastward, so that'll bring a chance of light rain, North Gulf Coast later tonight. Tomorrow, that front edges eastward. High wind advisories out for the Alaska Range, gusts 55 miles an hour through the passes. High surf advisory for St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait coast, as well as the northwest coast for 4 to 6 foot, or for tides as high as 3 to 6 feet, maybe above the average or what's forecast, and also for high seas with rain for the North Gulf Coast, and that weakens on the next day.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.